West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
We're back with former RNC chair and former Lieutenant Governor Michael Steele. Welcome, sir. I'll remind everyone with the stats on the screen here that there is widespread support, including Trump voters and many self-identified Republicans, on the basics about background checks, database, and even actual gun control, like an assault weapons ban, depending on how you answer the question. Your thoughts on what we just walked through?
No, I thought you laid out the current state of play here very concisely. It is than perhaps they may have been at other times. Not that they were less caring and less bothered by it, but there's something different about this. And I think one of the things that's different and why it's so much harder for the Ted Cruz's of the world to stand in front of a bank of cameras and acknowledge what their position has done and has allowed to occur is, for the first time, we're hearing stories about these babies, these children, being unrecognizable to their parents. Their parents have to give DNA samples so that they can match the child with the parent. And that, on top of everything else, is so difficult to comprehend, that the violence that occurred in that classroom was so devastating that mom has to submit a lock of hair or a swab of her own DNA in order to match this up, her with her child. And the country's looking at that and going, holy hell, no, are you kidding me? Imagine as a parent being in that position. Imagine as a relative being in that position, or a neighbor who used to see that child running down the street, or who would come collect money for a school event. No longer there because of this. And I think this has become very personal for a lot of Americans, Ari. So the way you've narratively set this out with the facts and the politics behind that, and the energy that's, I think, thrusting this story right now, is not so much that's all important, but how people are leaning into this because of what they now realize, which happened in other cases. But really, for the first time, we've seen this reported this way.
To pick up your point on the facts and the reality of the sheer gruesome evil of that, as you walked us through, but gruesome evil committed through a certain tool. In this case, tools of war, which is why, as I've explained to people, they're not tools of self-defense. And that's distinct from other places. Evil, violence has existed throughout the history of society, but we've shown throughout the coverage this week, and shown it before, that the gun-related violence is much higher. So we have the higher murder rate, we have the higher murdered children rate, we have now the highest cause of death among children in America is guns. And yet many of those guns aren't easy to get in other places, so they're not easy to use to, as you said, dismember people. We could be as clear and and frank about it as possible. Here's that headline I mentioned, which is the facts. And it's the same with grenades, Michael. I mean, if you had a grenade problem where people were walking around lobbing grenades into classrooms, as a society, you'd have to say, how do we weigh the access to grenades and what they're used for with the cost of the grenade mass murder? I'm not speaking loosely. The AR-15 and the grenade are both for war, and they're not precise or exact weapons that can be lawfully easily used for self-defense. As for the politics, I want to get you on this. We heard last night from Michael Hirschhorn, who's a progressive activist with a background in reality TV, which kind of a little bit of a combo there, but he believes that the message discipline on specifically the Democratic left, he says, is hurting some of the push for gun control, that some of the stuff he views it as quote unquote too emotional. Take a listen.
This is a moment for less emotion and more cynicism. How do we gain power so that we can put in place the policies that we want to put in place? Or we're responding emotionally and not strategically. They've lost that ability to think politically. We say things need to change, they have to change, but we know they're not going to change. We don't step back and say, what do we need to do in order to force things to change?
Michael, he gave the example specifically of how Clinton sold stopping, quote, cop killer bullets as the way that they sold the ban on those high capacity magazines in the 94 bill, which is fact check true. Your response?
No, I think he's right, and I think the messaging is very, very important. And I would align myself with him this way and say you can do both. I can be emotional about the tragedy in front of me, but I also need to be strategic about how I confront it and how I deal with it. First, messaging point. This isn't gun control, people. We're so past gun control. There are 400 million guns in this country for a nation of 20 million people. So we've got more guns than people. So it ain't about controlling anything. It is about gun safety, gun preparedness, gun responsibility. It is about making sure that the vast majority of gun owners are law-abiding, good people, good citizens, right, left, center. Their politics is irrelevant to how they own their guns. And what should be noted is the responsibility they have. So let's talk about it in that context on one end. But now let's move into the space where we're looking at dead bodies of children. And we cannot shy away from the fact that the reason we're doing that is because this individual decided to use a weapon of war, a weapon that quite honestly is being used on the front lines of Ukraine. All right. So the reality of it is this is not Ukraine. We're not in a war here. We're not in a war on our kids and our communities or people who go to the movies. So let's stop acting like we can't address that more directly and say, this is not just about the psychological impact. This is not about the Second Amendment. This is about what responsibility our elected leaders are going to take to do something about this, and the responsibility that's on us to hold them accountable. When they run away from the bank of microphones and can't answer a direct question, make that little checkbox for November, people, because that person needs to go.
It is Friday, the 27th of May of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, as we sit here morosely in this Diner of Life, and why are we sitting morosely? Because, look, I'm still not over it. I know kids are getting killed every single day, and the sum total are much greater than the 19 that were killed earlier this week. But it still bugs me that 19 were killed in a matter of minutes just earlier this week. Now, I've been pretty hard on the cops in that area, that jurisdiction, and I've been maybe a little hard on cops in general with their propensity to try to get every surplus military gear they can get their hands on and then not use it. in a real time of crises. I noticed that there were some cops with some long guns keeping the parents back, but they couldn't form a stack to breach that door and get in that school. Now, granted, I've never been a professional law enforcement officer. I did endeavor, ever so briefly, pass the physical, pass the obstacle course, that kind of thing. But then I had a change of heart about whether I really wanted to be in law enforcement. Okay? And I don't know, probably because I couldn't do the wombat thing. I couldn't mix literature with, being around a bunch of jarheads. Because I was already around a bunch of jarheads in a lot of other aspects of my life, and I was wondering, oh my God, give them a gun? And the authority of the state? Is that what I really want to surround myself with? What happens then? So I decided not to do that. But I don't have a knee-jerk reaction against law enforcement. I have friends and family who are in law enforcement. And they vote Democratic, too, I should note. Don't let anyone know. They might get beat up, or worse. You never know now. Yeah, there's gangs in LAPD. I'm serious. We used to say, you can tell a gang by its color when you talked about the cops, and now there are really color-carrying cops within LAPD. Fighting over turf. So, yeah, I've been maybe a little hard on them in a certain aspect, and look, I'm upset that these kids got killed because there's a sickness in our society. And you would expect, I don't know, the coaches, maybe, the cops, the priests, the ministers, maybe even a nun or two, to sort of step up and say, hey, kids, we don't have to live this way. All right? We don't need to dive under the desks if we don't have a threat from nukes. Take away the nukes, we don't have the threat. Oh, we have to have nukes. It's big. I mean, there's so many jobs tied up in making nukes. Too bad. Let's put that, I don't know, energy towards developing a different kind of energy and use of that energy then. If we're going to split an atom and make a sun, do we have to destroy ourselves in the process? We don't have to. And what is it every time we get some sort of great invention, we have to turn it into a weapon? Hey, we found a new way to boil water. Yeah, it's called a microwave. Oh, good. Maybe we can make it into a death ray then. I know it's a chicken and egg, which came first, but still. And what is this thing about we have to have this great, I don't know, advanced technology, and all we're doing is boiling water? Jeez, I think it'd be nice if we had some, direct energy. Where's the lithium crystals when we need them? Well, we don't live in that Star Trek world. Maybe one day. It's going to take a lot of energy. You think it's taking a lot of energy to make cryptocurrency? Think what it would take to keep the universe of Star Trek running. Did Roddenberry think about that? No one did. It was unlimitless resources. Wouldn't it be weird if we're the only species in the whole of all the universes of universes, and we're the ones that sucks it all out, depletes the resources of the universe? We might be the parasite that does that. But don't let the kiddies know in Florida. It might make them feel bad. Yeah. But cops parading around in their SWAT team ninja outfits in schools, and then they're part-time. Oh, yeah, we're only part-time, so you can't expect us to get to a conflict, a tragedy. It's our day off. I'm getting my nails done. And that's not gender-specific. Let's just be clear. Jeez. So, yeah, I might have been a little hard on the cops. Had a little tete-a-tete with what I finally determined was, I don't know, could have been a bot. I don't know. I went to the timeline. There was something about sports and then a little blurb every now and then about how people don't want to engage in clear discussions and they're all uneducated. And then it was directed at me because I called an urban assault vehicle a tank derisively as an insult. And it's like that thing that the NRA would do, or, remember whenever we would talk about guns and we would name it wrong, we'd call it an assault rifle or a military rifle, and people go, that's not a military rifle, that's a, some sort of nomenclature that's specific to the gun obsessed. Because we didn't have their jargon that any kind of argument we might have about the effects of what happens when a bullet at high ballistic speeds, what that does to, like a little human body. Like 6 to 10-year-olds, 11 maybe. What that does. You know what that does? It destroys them so much the parents have to offer up their DNA so they can match whatever it is that's... We turn our kids into clumps of meat. And I guess that's okay. We have to get over it. Then what's the next argument? Oh, you're just mad online. Well, why shouldn't I be? I'm mad offline, too, about it. Why aren't you? So I determined it was either a bot or a troll, and I blocked it. Eventually. Day and a half, but still. And that's their job. Whether it's in, like, the digital realm or the analog realm, meaning us, in this supposed reality. Their job is to sow and foment uncertainty, dissent, anger at self for being angry. I'm supposed to feeling bad about little kids being slaughtered to the point their parents have to offer up DNA to identify them. Give me an effing break. My adult son dies at 41 from a heart attack. I'm utterly devastated by that. All this time, 3 years later. Think about a parent who has to offer up their DNA. I got to hold my son at the wake. And that was still the most devastating part of existence that I've ever experienced. And I've seen a lot of bad stuff. I gotta tell you, the sight of little kids as clumps of meat has always bugged me. I don't know why that doesn't bug anybody else. Unless you're accustomed to making little kids clumps of meat, or you become so desensitized to it. I chose not to be desensitized thusly. I don't want to lose that feeling. I don't want to be, an automaton. Put on the visor. Hide behind the shield. And that's how you cope? No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have a world that's like that either. That's what representative democracy is to... I don't know, maybe I'm an idealist. Maybe I'm really a romantic. I thought that was supposed to supplant living under an authoritarian heel of law enforcement. Oh, you can have your representative democracy, but, I have 200 hours in the academy? They get to tell me what constitutionality is? Thanks. Yeah. Can you tell I'm livid? I am. Because we get back to the crux of the matter. If you have to lie, then I guess your argument really isn't sound. Was I lying that those urban assault vehicles are tanks? No, I wasn't lying about the insult. You know what a crotch rocket is, right? Motorcycle where you lean forward in it. Let's call it crotch rocket. Urban assault vehicles are cop crotch tanks. That's not a tank. I know it. I'm lobbing an insult. Get it? That's not a tank. Why, you're uneducated. We can't have civil discussions because of people like you. How many times have I heard that before? All right. Better to block. Don't even bother with mute. Block. All right. We got to keep the world from being wrested from our tender grasp. Okay? Please, I want puffy clouds in my universe. I don't want all this blood and gore. What's on the curated part of this show that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Hey, I know it's supposed to be like a salon, a culinary establishment, and I'm talking about gore and everything. I'm sorry, but it's a salon. We're able to handle it. All right. Well, starting off at the top, yes, the GOP obsession with guns reveals a major weakness within the party. And I would mention that I think we should hold them to the party of responsibility at their word. We're not going to get rid of more guns than there are people in the United States by multiples. Not going to happen. But there's responsible gun ownership. I keep hearing that. Well, how about we actually have responsible gun ownership? It's irresponsible to have weapons of war in our streets in the hands of anybody. It is irresponsible for the party of responsibility to embrace that. Okay? Responsibility. Do they have it or do they not? Let's elect people that do. On the rest of the menu, the Interior Department announced funding to clean up abandoned oil and gas wells. You know, those zombie wells. They just won't stop eating. The Senate GOP unanimously blocked a bill to combat domestic terrorism because they are domestic terrorists. And Susan Collins blocked the confirmation of a NOAA official over rules designed to protect rare whales. And what the F is NOAA supposed to do? I don't know. I guess they wrote it in chalk, and she doesn't like chalk. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the United States won the latest round of a legal battle to seize a $325 million, 348-foot Russian-owned super yacht in Fiji. And the Turkish central banks will keep the interest rate at 14% despite a 70%, and that's 70% rate of inflation. Erdogan is doing the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. But that's because right is always wrong. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Page at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And as just a friendly reminder, Kelly will be at Netroots Nation this year, broadcasting for Netroots Radio. I don't know if there's going to be an actual media radio row, but Kelly will be out and about gathering the interviews that she is known for and other tidbits as well at Netroots Nation, so stay tuned for that. If you would look across the page from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will hopefully notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it would really help. if you could maybe send us what you might spend on, how about an espresso type coffee drink? How about that? If you could send that amount of money you would spend on that to us once a month, it really does help. It helps us pay our bills and then continue flying under the radar. And for now, we're getting away with it for 11 years. That's how devoted we are to this. And we thank you for being so generous so that we can fly under the radar and continue this resistance to dark forces arrayed around the world to not only stop representative democracy here in the United States, but around the world. Not going to happen. Thank you for your generosity, then, in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended. And we believe that. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. And a whole lot more. Both he and Kelly do much more than just what they do. Thank you, guys. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary. It's going to be a diary. I'm old school. On Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that posted up on social media platforms like Twitter. Oh, I should mention, I just had a small part in it. But I'm glad to have a small part. But Daily Co's has been in existence for 20 years. 20 years anniversary this year. And there was a award ceremony, the Koza Oscars, that's it. The Koskers. But anyway, Black Co's was elected as top group on Daily Co's for the past 20 years. And thank you. I'm the poetry editor there and have been not too long after Dopper started Black Co's 10 years ago. Well, actually a little bit longer than that, 11, 12 years ago now, because Netroots Radio began shortly after my tenure, at least within a year or maybe over a year. I'd been the poetry editor at Black Co's. So, yeah, we've been doing this for quite a while, and thank you for the honor. It's quite an honor. And Denise Oliver Velez, Dopper, Cepheus over the years, and others, Moral Yui, and all sorts of folk who have been, even Shanika. Shanika has been part of that over the years. But Denise Oliver Velez also won some other personal awards, and congratulations to her as well. So thanks for the acknowledgement at Black Co's. It's quite an honor. All right. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. And do please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. Really wherever podcasts can be found. And also the deep archive of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy and the whole Netroots Radio library can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay. And, of course, the links to those can be found in the show notes and links, just so you know. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is from the American Independent by the great Oliver Willis. The Department of Interior announced the allocation of $33 million under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act to plug, remediate, and reclaim 227 orphaned oil and gas wells located on public lands. I call them zombie wells because they just keep eating. They do. According to the Natural Resources Defense Council, orphaned or abandoned oil and natural gas wells are those that have gone dry, leading their operators to leave them and move on. Orphaned wells are those for which no former owner or operator can be located, while the term abandoned well typically refers to an unproductive well with a known owner-operator. In either case, the wells remain uncapped. And I got to tell you, that bugs me since I been intimately involved in exploration and production of oil and gas back in the day. It is utterly irresponsible to leave a well unproductive or otherwise without it being capped. Because you can always uncap it. I know you got to get a fishing team and get all whatever broken bits might be in there. But that's what they don't want to pay for. Let's just leave. So they are essentially open holes in the ground that need to be cleaned and plugged with cement to stop their pollutants from escaping into the environment. They're dry, but there's a lot of poison that was put down there to get whatever we wanted out. These wells continue to leak chemicals into the soil and air, contaminating groundwater used by local communities. They can also be a source of methane gases that can cause poisoning and explosions and also contribute to climate change. Cleanup of the wells is costly, and often the oil and gas industry has not met their obligations to communities, leaving the issue up to states and local municipalities to deal with. Israel of the American Independent brings us this next offering in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Senate Republicans blocked consideration of a bill yesterday, Thursday, that would have made it easier for the federal government to prevent and respond to domestic terrorism. All 48 Democratic senators present voted in favor of cloture on a motion to begin debate on the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. At the end of voting, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer switched his vote yes to no to give himself the option of forcing a vote to reconsider in the future, and the final tally was 47 to 47 short of the 60 votes required to stop a Republican filibuster that they were using to stop domestic terrorism in the United States, fomented by them. What would you expect? I keep telling everybody, you don't negotiate with Nazis. You punch them. They voted down even discussing having a debate on this bill. Am I livid? Now, the bill would mobilize federal agencies to examine domestic terrorism threats, improve interagency communication on potential attacks, create new offices in the DHS, the Justice Department, and the FBI, and to monitor, analyze, investigate, and prosecute domestic terrorism. And the Republicans en masse voted down that debate. Associated Press staff bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Maine Senator Susan Collins halted a nominee's potential appointment to a federal post over objections to rules designed to protect rare whales. Collins cited new regulations on her state's lobster fishing industry that she described as onerous. The rules restrict commercial lobster harvesting and are intended to protect North Atlantic right whales from entanglement in gear. Collins stopped a vote on Wednesday about the confirmation of Janie Kumar Bafiji as Assistant Secretary of the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration. The Maine Public reported NOAA is a federal agency that regulates oceans and fisheries. The new restrictions include a rule that requires lobster fishermen to install weak links in gear that allow whales to break free. Oh, we don't want to do that. Collins and other Maine politicians called on NOAA to delay the implementation of the rules earlier this spring because the gear was not available to many lobster fishermen. Really? You're going to use that excuse? All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, The Past is Back. Director Audrey Dewan couldn't possibly have timed it better, but her latest film, The Happening, made its American debut a week after a leaked memo suggested that the U.S. Supreme Court is on its way to overturning the decision which legalized abortion in the U.S. nearly 50 years ago. If you were born post-Roe and ever wondered what it would look like if abortion services weren't available, then The Happening offers a terrifying glimpse. Set in early 60s France and based on the memoir the same name, the main character, Anne, finds herself pregnant. As a promising young college student, Anne knows she doesn't want to be a mother, but her choices are limited. Not only is abortion illegal in that era in France, but she could be criminally charged if she is found out to have terminated the pregnancy. Nonetheless, she's willing to take her chances, and most of the movie's screen time is spent following her, navigating the seedy French criminal underworld to find an abortion provider who at least looks survivably competent. At times, the movie is as much a thriller as it is a drama, and even verges on horror when 2 abortion attempts are shown in graphic detail. Worse still is how Anne is treated on her lonely journey. As she tells the father, who is financially and emotionally unsupportive, she will take care of it, which is what she does. Not only is Anne relatable, but the characters manage a vaguely contemporary look with respect to their clothes and hairstyles, probably not by accident, amidst the period sets. If certain parties get their way, this one could end up as a rip from the headlines piece in short order. Not that the U.S. Supreme Court cares what the majority of Americans want. One struggles to imagine just who wants a return to the world portrayed in The Happening. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Emily Schwing. Oil and water, apples and oranges, fire and ice. None of these things really seem like they have much to do with one another. Or do they?
We found that more fire-favorable weather associated with declines in the Arctic sea ice during summer can increase autumn wildfires over the western United States.
Hailong Wang is an earth scientist at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Washington State.
So we analyzed a few decades of observations on wildfire incidents, sea ice cover, and weather conditions to identify a relationship between Arctic sea ice declining and the wildfire risks. We call it a teleconnection.
Wang says this idea of a fire and ice teleconnection, it's not new. It's a lot like the so-called butterfly effect, a term coined by meteorologist Edward Lorenz in the 1960s to explain chaos theory. The idea can be summarized like this. If a butterfly flaps its wings in one location, that could displace enough air to cause a tornado or some other large-scale atmospheric storm elsewhere.
Yeah, we certainly didn't invent this concept, but it has been in the atmospheric sciences for a long time. So because of the connections within the Earth system, especially in the atmosphere, one small change in one region could affect other regions through the atmospheric circulation.
Connections between declining sea ice and wildfire weather have been made before. Wang says previous findings have relied heavily on statistical relationships.
For example, they find that Arctic sea ice are declining in many years, and they also found increase in extreme weather like wildfires in the western U.S.
But they couldn't explain the cause and effect. So Wang and colleagues took those known statistical relationships one step further. The team applied them to a state-of-the-art climate model with wildfire prediction capabilities.
In that way, we were able to identify the response of the climate system, including the fire weather over the western U.S. and other responses to the Arctic sea ice.
What they found is a tale of two vortices.
So when the summer sea ice is much reduced, ocean can absorb and store more heat from sunlight. Less sea ice cover over the Arctic will allow more heat also to be released from the ocean to the atmosphere in the following autumn and early winter. Otherwise, the sea ice can insulate the heat from the ocean to the air.
So more heat's released to the atmosphere as the sea ice declines.
The anomalous heat in the Arctic can form rising air from the surface, and that can strengthen the low pressure system, which is one of the spinning vortex. It's counterclockwise.
This forms a low pressure system, and Wang says when it moves south, it pushes the polar jet stream off its normal course and forms a second vortex.
So this shift also facilitates the formation of a high pressure system over the western U.S. This high pressure system is a clockwise spinning vortex. This drives dry and hot air to descend to the ground from the upper air to the ground. Normally comes with clear skies and no precipitation. So those are all favorable weather conditions for wildfire hazards.
The findings are published in Nature Communications, and Wang says wildfire might not be the only result of declining sea ice.
The Arctic changes could also be connected to extreme cold weather.
Like the infamous 2021 Texas ice and snowstorm that knocked out power to millions and caused billions of dollars in damage. Wang says looking for more teleconnections is where his research will go next.
So moving forward, we like to explore more connections of Arctic changes to extreme weather, climate change over other regions of the entire globe along that direction.
If wildfires and sea ice could be this climatically entwined, surely there are other climate surprises just waiting to be unraveled. For 60 Second Science, I'm Emily Schwing.
Don't you wish your life came with a warning app?
Stop. That dog does not want to be petted.
Just a little heads up before something bad happens.
Move your coffee cup away from your computer.
Oh, no.
So you can have more control.
Stop. You're texting your boss by mistake.
Uh-oh. Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but prediabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes like managing your weight, getting active, stopping smoking, and eating healthier, you can stop prediabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. It's easy to learn your risk. Take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Warning, the cap is loose on that catch-up.
Ugh. Don't wait. You have the power to change the outcome. Visit doihaveprediabetes.org today. That's doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
1 in 6 Americans get sick from eating contaminated food each year. Contamination caused by salmonella is especially common. It's sometimes found in poultry, eggs, ground beef, pork, and even peanut butter. To reduce your risk from this and other foodborne germs, remember to clean, separate, cook, and chill. Clean your hands with soap and water. Separate raw meat, poultry, and seafood from other foods. Wash counters, cutting boards, and utensils before and after using them. Cook all food thoroughly and use a food thermometer to make sure food is cooked. Promptly chill meat, poultry, eggs, and other perishables. Finally, don't prepare food for others if you're sick, and be extra careful when you prepare food for children, pregnant women, the elderly, or people in poor health. To learn more about making food safer to eat, visit www.cdc.gov/vital signs.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. George Washington's vigorous policies established the president as an energetic leader, not a ceremonial figurehead. But he was careful to stay within the bounds of the Constitution. Washington required subordinates to seek his approval for their actions and accepted personal responsibility for their conduct. While he consulted with the Senate on appointments, he insisted that the president alone had the authority to fire an appointee, guaranteeing the president's control of every member of the executive branch. It was during Washington's presidency that the idea of implied powers in the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution was first invoked to justify his signing the law creating the first national bank. As commander-in-chief, Washington called out the militia and put down the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794. He took a strong hand in foreign policy, prudently resisting British and French threats to American interests, and at the same time keeping the young nation out of the European War. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
When is a right not a right? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The dictionary defines the word right as, quote, a legal entitlement to have or obtain something. A legal entitlement. For half a century, women in the United States have had the right to control their own bodies, to make their own choice. Now, it seems virtually certain from Samuel Alito's draft opinion in the Dobbs case that 5 members of the Supreme Court, based not on any change in the law, based not on any change in the facts, are going to throw out a half century of precedent and strip women of their right, their liberty, their dignity, and put politicians in charge of their bodies. Can a state force a woman who is raped and becomes pregnant to carry the fetus to term? That's a perfectly fine law, according to the 5 justices. And how about a 12-year-old girl who is the victim of incest? Again, a totally valid exercise of governmental power. And how about a law that requires a woman to carry to term and give birth to a fetus that cannot and will never survive outside the womb? No problem with a law like that, say these justices. The most immediate take-home lesson from Alito's opinion: in the United States today, what you thought was a federal constitutional right is not. such a right whenever 5 justices decide to take it away. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the day the United States Supreme Court unanimously declared the National Industrial Relations Act unconstitutional. The act had been passed just 2 years before as the centerpiece of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's plan to combat the Great Depression. By the time Roosevelt took office, nearly a quarter of the nation's workforce was unemployed. To combat this staggering unemployment, the act called for $3.3 billion to be spent on public works projects. It also sought to regulate industry to better promote fair competition. Businesses that adopted the act's codes could display a poster emblazoned with a blue eagle. Each poster declared, "We do our part." At first, there was positive public feedback for the plan. Hugh S. Johnson, one of the primary authors of the act, was even named Time magazine's Man of the Year for 1933. But soon, businesses began to complain about the many regulatory codes associated with the act. The act was intended as an emergency plan and was set to expire after 2 years, but it did not make it that far. The Schechter Poultry Corporation was found to be in violation of several codes. They claimed the codes were unconstitutional, and the company fought the violations all the way to the United States Supreme Court and won a unanimous decision. But for those in the labor movement, the most important part of the act was Title I, Section 7, Part A. And although the designation might sound boring, its message was powerful. It read in part that employees shall have the right to organize and bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing. With the act's passage, union membership grew. For example, the Amalgamated Clothing Workers Union doubled in size from 60,000 to 120,000 members.